Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Profluence Sports. Got Miles and Leo from the World Fencing League. So, fellas, appreciate you hopping on, and been excited for this one. A unique sport, that a lot of people know from the Olympics, but deserves more attention. So, thanks for hopping on.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Andrew.
Leo, kick us off. You've been on. You're a two-time guest, which we have very few of. Almost 300 episodes, and I think you're only one of like 2 or 3 people. So, obviously, important person here. Give us a quick background on you, where you fit into World Fencing League. We'll sometimes say WFL just for listeners, but then Miles will come up to you. Yeah. But get us rolling, Leo.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. And a big compliment to be back on, naturally. So my side, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Chiron Sports Group. We're a growth equity investor focused on sports media and entertainment. We spend our lives trying to concoct strategies that will capture the tailwinds behind this industry and deliver value for our family offices. That's all we do. And I think disruptor leagues were a theme for everyone for the last couple of years, and we landed on fencing actually when I first met Miles, and we can go into that story in a bit. And so my role in World Fencing League is as co-founder and chairman.
Love that. Miles, hit us quick high level on you. Obviously, we'll put links to everything, so people, I'm sure if they're clicking, they'll see some of the things you got going, but give us the high level of yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. So I'm a 3-time Olympian, Olympic bronze medalist, 2-time world champion. That's my on-the-piste accolades. And one now that I'm really, really excited about is creating this WFL, or the World Fencing League, with Leo, Zen, and Carl. And I've got an amazing team. And Leo and I were talking about some other business opportunity and talking about leagues and all these things. I was like, I would really love to do a fencing league. And he's like, hold on a minute, call me back. And you can kind of, get back into that, Leo. But it was kind of like this perfect timing, right? Where after the Olympics, I kind of started to see a real rise in the sport, let alone the audience, let alone the people that I was kind of bringing to, the Grand Palais to watch me compete. Just kind of struck a lot of light bulbs in my head of like, okay, beautiful sport. The issue is, A, people understanding what fencing is, and B, getting people to the actual event, right? And immediately we all sat down and were like, okay, this is fencing, right? Technically, it is a combat sport. It's pure combat. But why has it not evolved, right? And we were kind of breaking down these kind of emerging sports leagues and seeing, what's kind of been the niche, what's kind of been the, positive aspect of changing the sport. And we realized that tech is the most important thing in sports, right? If you've got all these sports that are growing, football, basketball, AR, replays, all these new machines, fencing is kind of one sport that kind of has never changed. And we realized that the biggest kind of gamble for us is changing the sport, but keeping the integrity through a brand new tech, which is why our amazing partner Dentsu Japan created this AI blade tracking. As a fencer, it is incredible. As a fan, I can't even imagine what they're gonna, see from the audience. But this is kind of our biggest issue at hand, was solving the understanding aspect of the sport. Because when you come down to TV rights, people that want to see the sport, you have to understand it, right? There's like a 30-second window of people understanding before they kind of change the TV. So we solved that, which is incredible. And I'll let kind of Leo, kind of tell us about that journey. But it took a long time to kind of get this done, but also really realize this is our kind of niche aspect of the sport. But once we kind of solve this issue, then we have the ability to control where the sport goes in the future.
Love that. Yeah, I appreciate the high level. And I'm going to come back to you here in a sec, but I want to go to Leo. We'll try to keep it going back and forth. Leo, what did you know? Again, I'll say right now, that's why I'm excited about this conversation. I know very little about fencing as a whole. What did you know? Do you know anything? Like, what from the start were you like, okay, I need to dive in? Or like, where did you even start from an education level?
I mean, with one of the best fencers in the world on this call, I'm going to completely embarrass myself with this, but in fact, Miles can comment on my level of knowledge when we started. It couldn't have been more than a 3 out of 10. I've watched it in the Olympics. I have friends that have done it. I might have done it once or twice as a kid, but if you asked me 2 years ago what's the difference between saber and épée, would have been hard to distinguish. And I think that's one of the eye-opening facts about this sport, which is there's a level of complexity that makes it interesting. But the issue, which Miles pointed out perfectly, is you can't understand the complexity because there's no tech to enable that. So, watching guys on piste do different disciplines in fencing for me and you, Andrew, is pretty hard to figure out what's happening. Applying the technology on top of that so that me and you can understand what's happening makes life really easy, because we're like, okay, he's a good saber fighter. He has a strategic advantage because of these reasons. In épée, this guy might have the advantage. And one really brilliant concept that Carl, actually, one of our other co-founders, came up with was we need to bridge fencing so that from the outside world, it looks like one fencing. But for those that want to be engaged in the community, you can understand that our team are going to operate by doing saber, épée, and foil. And so I guess in answer to your question, I think I was about a 3, but I'm hopeful Miles will give me like a 6 or a 7.
No. I think you might know more than me now. No, but he's really educated himself. But I think that's very important, right? Is to have people like, your co-founders kind of have this blind eye to not really understanding the sport. So every reaction for them is really pure and true, right? Because it's like they don't really know. So when you have someone like Carl, who's our other co-founder, who was an ex-fencer at Indy, went to business school, so he understands the sport, but also understands the business side, and almost more importantly is the culture within the sport, right? Because every other sport has their own culture, right? Where it's like, these are your brothers, these are who you fence against. But for us, it's unique because on the Saturday, they're my opponents, but on the Sunday, they're my teammates, right? But it's such an interesting culture to understand. And even the people that are embedded in the sport of fencing still don't really understand what's going on because there's so many, kind of complexities to it with the referee, with the right of way, and we've kind of realized we have to attack these right away because these are the most important questions that every fan has: is who's getting hit, how's somebody getting hit, and how come they have the right of way when they don't. So we kind of took these two massive components and said this is what we need to solve first. So that was kind of our biggest kind of team understanding, was this is the biggest way for us to get a new audience into the sport.
And Miles, just real quick here, I'm sure your story's out there, but how did you get into fencing to begin with? Because, for me, I played, 5, 6 different sports growing up, then funneled down to basketball because it was the most fun. I could get a scholarship, but I never even I don't even know anyone that fence. I literally know you're the first person I know that is a fencer. How did you even get into this, or what's your story a little bit?
Yeah, so I was born in London and moved to America when I was about, I think, 9 for the first time. Went right to public school, was a bad kid growing up. Surprise, surprise. Get kicked out of that school. Then ended up picking up fencing as a punishment after school at the Dwight School because I had to pick up tennis, fencing, or badminton until my grades got better because they were considered mental sports. I was like, whatever, swords are fun. And I'm like, wait, I can quote unquote taboo, but not get in trouble. This is the coolest sport in the world. And if you think about it, growing up with all your friends, right, you take sticks in the park and play with each other. So I basically turned this little quote-unquote hobby, fun thing for me to get back into school into my actual career. So if I never got into trouble, I would never got out of trouble, which is a double-sided sword, which is a full circle moment for me, which is kind of crazy that now. I told my mom, I was like, Mom, if I wasn't a bad kid, the life would be a lot different now. So to all the teachers out there, you're superheroes. I think it was fencing kind of became my purpose and became my Adderall per se, right? Because of ADHD. And those kind of sports, kind of force you to really zone in because they're like physical chess. Right? You have to think ahead, you have to react. But it's also one of sports that you kind of can use your feeling as well. So that's why fencing's so, unique. I think because it has so many different tangibles, yet it is still pure combat, yet mental, yet physical. So that was how I started fencing. Ellen Grayson, if she watches this, she changed my life. She saw my potential and she was like, all right, this is your purpose. And then I kind of started to really focus in on fencing, which helped me with my academic life, which ended up helping out with my life in general. So that was kind of how I started fencing because I knew nothing about it like you.
And Leo or Miles, you can take this, but what's the current setup, right? We all know it's in the Olympics. Is there college? Is there international stuff? You had mentioned, hey, you're sparring someone on Saturday and your teammates with them on Sunday. Is there high school? What is the current ecosystem flow of, or even youth? What does it look like to progress from grassroots all the way to being a top, fencer in the world?
You want this one, Leo, or?
Your sport, man. We
See, I like it. My team, everybody's selfless, everyone. So I think for us, right, was we needed to understand at the grassroots level, right, barrier to entry, right? So okay, let's see which parts of the America, right? We'll start with America because that was kind of the lowest hanging fruit, right? Like Italy, France, Russia, Korea, they're all governmentally funded sports, so they're gonna be okay. So we figured, okay, we need to understand how many kids are fencing, how many people are members, how they're fencing, and the area that they're fencing in, right? So we're doing a lot of this kind of data research because we want to hit the markets that have no fencing in them, right? Which, funny enough, for those big cities, right? There's Miami, there's obviously the state of Florida, there's the state of Texas, which kind of are the biggest states in America, obviously besides California, but they don't really have fencing, right? It's the blue collar sports, it's the footballs, the basketballs. So we realized, okay, cool, these are our markets. Yet we realized that post, right, it goes So I'll tell you how it works, right? So if you're under 10, that's where you kind of start your regional circuit. Under 10, under 12, under 14. Your first world team you can make is under 16, which is called cadets, okay? Which is qualified through the Junior Olympics. And then there's the under 20, which is the last event in the Junior Olympics, okay? And then around this times where you start getting recruited by colleges, okay? If you're part of the, I'd say the big eight, right? You got the Notre Dames, the Ohio States, the Penn States, the Stanfords, the Harvard, the Columbia, the Princeton, the Yale, right? Those are kind of the peak schools in fencing. Like 90% of my Olympic team or people that are fencing in the sport, in order to fence, you have to make money, correct? And at the end of the day, there's no real system for people that can make money, unless, take me out of it, right? Where, I'm grateful that I've got a lot of endorsements and brands, but if it's $50,000 to win the Olympic gold medal, personally, I think that's a slap in the face. That is impossible to sustain, right? That's winning the highest level in the sport. So in order to get there, how do you get there? So most kids will try and make the Olympics, go to college, juggle these two, and then most of them will do a finance job, which is okay. But a lot of them want to fence, but they can't fence because there's no economic means to do this. So we realized that past college, there's nothing else, right? If you're lucky, you can travel to the FIE circuit. And if you're 0.001%, you can go to the Olympics. But you could be top 16 in the world and not even go to the Olympics yet. So we realized that there not only are amazing fencers who won't even be able to go to the highest level, there's so many kids who don't even want to try because there's no actual end goal for them, right? Parents can't invest in their kids because there's no system in place. It's not like, oh, well, okay, well now with NIL, we can see these kids that are 15, 16 and say, hey, we see potential in you. And at the end of the day, they just want to be able to fence and make money. That's all it is at the end of the day. But nobody can do that unless you are in these kind of pockets of Europe, pockets of Asia. So this is kind of one of the many reasons why we started the WFL, was because not only do we want to create an economic system for these kids, but we want to create an actual roadmap. So when you're 14 years old, this is your step. This is your next step. This is your next step. And with the WFL, there's an actual end goal and an actual system in place that we will have, so these kids can not only be part of an actual league and be noticed and be on TV and become like an actual athlete, but they also can make some actual money, right? So like there's these two things that no one's tried to build or even try to understand the culture. So we realize that we're taking this massive task on, but we believe that with, the way we want to franchise it down the line, I think this is the actual model for the sport moving forward. I just rambled on there, bro. That made sense.
No, that's great. That was great.
It's also quite interesting from a college perspective because, unlike a lot of sports, good football schools are also often good basketball schools. Fencing has a bit of a niche. The fact that Stanford and Harvard are good at fencing places fencing in a bit of a different category. And Andrew, we've talked about college a few times, but one of the amazing things about fencing in college is it's not very expensive for colleges to run versus the enrollment that it generates for them. And so it's actually a really good sport for colleges. And so if you think about macro tailwinds around college, some sports might get deprioritized from an Olympic sport perspective, but fencing is actually the opposite. It's getting really, really a lot of focus.
Yeah, exactly. And not only can we help with, with all their missions, right? Like there's so many kids who, number one kid in the country, my friend AJ at BYU, he got paid a nice amount of money to go to a program at BYU, and then he changed the entire program around for who knows how long, right? So it's like, even though, fencing might be lower on the totem pole for now, if you're getting a world champion or Olympic champion that came out of your school on the fencing team, very few of those guys from the NFL will be at that level of being Super Bowl, right? That's kind of the comparison. So you realize that these schools, they want the best athletes regardless of the sport. And we're giving now an understanding of what that looks like for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, no, that's helpful context on both your fronts. Leo, what's the international look like scene, right? We talked a lot about US, but where are other strong pockets? I'm coming into this pretty much with a blank slate. So, who's usually, what countries are usually dominating? What other areas have like huge pockets?
Yeah, I'll say this one. It kind of depends upon how people are getting into fencing in the country. So US is very college dominated, but lots of countries have it by tradition and other countries do it through the military. So countries like maybe continents like Europe, fencing is a tradition. Italy's done it for many, many years. France, Hungary, you name it. There are many, many great fencers that come out of these countries. Other countries have it as a military requirement, and you see this a lot in Eastern Europe and partly in Asia. And because of that, many great fencers come out of those areas as well. One of the things that's amazing from our perspective is therefore there's a natural enrollment pool. There's always more guys coming through. You don't necessarily have to encourage people to get into the sport. There's a natural mechanism. So that's really interesting. Coupled with that fact, one of the things I love about this sport is that I think it's future-proofed. In other words, it's safe. I wouldn't love the idea of fighting Miles in a ring with boxing gloves. I really would not leave in a good shape. But I'm happy to have a go at fencing him. He'll win for sure, but I'm happy to have a go. From a gender perspective, it's basically equal. Men and women are treated equally. But more than that, at least with World Fencing League, they'll compete together. So it shares that kind of similarity to doubles tennis, where actually men and women can form part of the same team. And so if you think about some of the issues around media deals that we see in women's sport today, this won't have that. They're together. And then the final thing I love about this is the cultural links that we always see. You always see fencing or sword fighting in movies, in fantasy, in games. If I told you fencing, the first thing you probably think about is maybe a James Bond scene or a Marvel comic or
Parent Trap.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's a reason for that. We're attracted to two people dueling. There's not really anything more exciting than that. And that's always been the case. And I hope that always will be the case. And so we believe there's a real future-proofed element to this sport.
Yeah. And it's the coolest sport. Think about it. Layman's terms, we're professional sword fighters. Nick, I mean, let's be honest here. That sounds pretty damn cool, Andrew, no?
It does. I'm curious on, are you adding, you see some of these emerging leagues take interesting rule, I don't want to say rule changes, but like they start to add in some other elements. Are you guys thinking too of how you can even put your own spin or shape on the sport?
You want to start this one off?
Yeah, I'll take this one. 100%, because fencing is also subjective to a way, right? Where so much of the control is in the referee's hands, right? Some fencers, it works for them. Some fencers, it doesn't. Some referees, I don't want to get in trouble, but they could be compromised at higher events, right? That's sports in general, right? So our thing is that we can almost not eliminate or give them less control, which why through the AI blade tracking, because it's so obvious into your face. Not only will that serve a purpose that is fair for everybody, but also it shows you the complexity of the sport, one. And I think there's a lot of fencers who immediately were so, how do I help, right? Was such a nice feeling for us to have, because it was like, okay, what if the top guys like me or aren't like, oh, no, I don't want to join it. But when you have the best fencers in the world who are going to be competing April 25th, you realize that this is obviously what we're starting, but it's for the whole sport in general. And you have those guys who are like, how can I help? Because I really don't like this. So because I really don't like this. So we're also asking athletes, because we actually care about them. And we want them to know that if there's something that is an issue in your sport, let's bring it up. And let's ask the best fencers in the world, how is something that you want to change or do? So we are adding some things, and all these kind of new rule changes have been received very well from the best fencers in the world. And I think taking fencing back to combat, right, which is you're allowed to touch the person, right, if you shoulder soldier, but a lot of times it's an immediate halt, which is like everyone has to stop. Well, we're going to try and add a little more, take it back to the roots of what the sport used to be, still have the integrity, but a lot of things can happen in those 5 to 10 seconds that the referees almost say halt. Then there's timing changes, there's things that we want to change that I think will just make the sport easier to understand and better for the fencer, which is a win-win for the sport in general. So if the best fencers in the world are behind us, then I think the proof is right there already, and they all love the ideas of us rule changes, and we can also keep evolving the sport. We own the league, we're in control, and we say what goes. So if there's something that we want to try, let's try it, and Carl, our amazing co-founder, and Jen are also going to these, they're trying new rules with top fencers already. So it's not like we're just creating a league. We're really starting at beyond the grassroots. We're like trying to change the rules as better for the fencer and the audience. Not many leagues are trying to do this because they care about the actual athletes, right? Because at the end of the day, if they're not competing, then it's not going to reach the highest level, right? And if they want to compete in it, it just shows you that we're the highest level of the sport. And I think that's ultimately what we want to have in the future.
The process around the rule changes is quite interesting. Would you be interested, Andrew? Should we dive in? Yeah. So I have a background in biotech. I spent a couple of years doing biotech venture investing. And one of the things I learned is that clinical trials are always debated. Was the data right? Was the process right? Et cetera, et cetera. In changing a sport, we're going to come across the same feedback, especially from, senior officials, regulators, colleges, institutional stakeholders. And so one of the things we're doing, which I don't think any other sport's ever done before, is to trial every single rule change amongst a peer group of professional or at least college standard fencers, have them decide what works, check the data to see what works, and then keep iterating. And so we've done this so far at Notre Dame, San Diego, Miles looking at New York Fencing Club, and a couple of others. And very helpfully, as As Miles alluded to, Zen and Carl have been running this really successfully, and so we're trying to figure out if we change the bout number of points from points to time, for example, what impact does that have? How does that change the strategy for Miles when he competes? And so it's all about these tiny refinements, checked by data, checked by people watching it, to try and figure out what's the best product we can put out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's helpful. I want to go to this next. How are you thinking about? You had mentioned a little bit. Is it male and female teams? What's the structure of the league? How are you thinking through that? Are you going to go more nationality and country? Are you going to go more? How are you thinking through then? Stirring that up where people are like, I think the Olympics were great because it's like, hey, Britain versus US, or it's, obviously NFL teams, Pittsburgh versus LA. What's the thoughts of how you guys build that out for fencing?
Yeah, for the debut event on the 25th of April in Los Angeles, the first ambition was we need to get the best guys and girls in the world to compete.
Yeah.
And so the first mandate was to reach out, and a lot of them through Miles's network, and say, hey guys, we think you're the best in your discipline. We'd like you to come. And so through that, we've pulled together 2 teams of who we think are the best in their respective disciplines. The first 2 teams, by nature, we'll be calling Team Blade and Team Shield. But in reality, over time, we will also look to focus more teams as we franchise the model associated with particular fan bases. We're trying to figure out right now if that's by geography or by something else. But one of the cool things about this trial method is we're trying to figure out what can capture the best fan allegiances. Someone came to me the other day and said you should have a team in video against a team meta. And that would be amazing, because one of the cool things about fencing is it has that precision, that intelligence, kind of speed that you associate with technology companies. And so the team association is quite interesting, whether you go geographic or whether you go more brand.
Exactly. We have honestly, fencing, right? It's one-on-one, right? But it's like, whether obviously I'm going to go against men and women go against women, but why can't, obviously we go against each other, but why can't they be part of the same team even though we don't fence with them, right? And then it gives them this inclusion where, because obviously there's there's height and there's weight and all that stuff, but like at the end of the day, it's, they're still the best and the best of each other. So we can have them integrated within us. So it's one team, because, you don't want someone to feel left out just because, they're a woman. Doesn't make any difference. So for us, it was understanding that we want to also bring them up as well in the sport. And it's not just about men, but it's about women as well. And, I think having their input is also, if not more important than the men, than just because they're seeing it from a different perspective, right? And we watch men, we watch women, we watch men. It's been really, really cool to have that kind of energy, yet it is individual, yet it's team. And like you said, nothing's better when you're just cheering on your teammates. And I don't know if you're familiar with like the Laver Cup, right? Where it's these guys going against each other, but the guys who aren't competing are cheering on, and it's the best energy. And these are something things that it is a team, but it's also individual, right? But you have that team energy, which is what I think people love to just kind of cheer for.
Yeah. And question on this, because I've heard this from other people that have worked at, NFL or helmet centered sports. You don't always get the facial component, which is what helps like NBA, sponsorship and branding. And obviously, Miles, I'm sure you deal with this just yourself and brand deals. How are you thinking about that? How are you thinking about, brands? That's sort of open-ended here, but like, how are you thinking about then also building the athletes up through the league and what you guys are doing?
Well, I'll just say one thing quickly. I think for us, it's almost like the most fun, right? Because in the sport of fencing, right, like we have Mars, got our last names, right? That's why I tattooed my hands. But there's reasons why we started this league, because fencing is one of 3 of the oldest sports in the Olympiad: fencing, wrestling, and the athletics, right? But our sport hasn't changed in a way of the aesthetic. If you ask these questions, why is it always white? No one has an answer. They say it's because they used to hold up. That's because what blood would show back in the day. Why are our helmets? Why can't we see through our helmets? Right? We tried to plexiglass in the Olympics, so we're thinking about a lot of things. We don't want to say too many before people steal our ideas, but we are definitely working on ways to give our athletes a jersey that makes sense to you. Which every athlete wants a jersey. They wants people with their name on it. They want to be, have this fan base. So we will create that, but there's many ways that we can create that, whether it's through our own version of Drive to Survive, whether it's through our own version of marketing. But we have ideas. But I think giving the athletes a story is the most important thing, because you don't care who they are. But if you're from Italy, you're like, I'm cheering for my guy because of this reason. So it's also about getting people to understand who these athletes are at first. What are their stories? And then you can choose who you want to be part of.
Yeah, no, I like that. Lee, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. How are you thinking of commercial side of things, right? How are you thinking about media rights? How are you thinking about brands? How are you thinking about sponsors? How are you thinking about, just bringing other people into the fold and mix, and maybe even, throwing some of Miles and stretching his brands across the league and, building community around it? How are you thinking about the commercial aspect?
Yeah. The really good news is we've got the guy that got it right. He's sitting here in a pink sweater. It's really easy to see he's got it right. And so we kind of know what to do. And so from my perspective, there's two routes of commercialization for the league. On the one hand, there's the league, which I can talk about, but on the other, there's actually the athletes. Like, a big part of paying the athletes is winning, sure, but a bigger part of promoting the athletes is encouraging them to be commercial in themselves and be able to secure the brand deals and everything else they want because we give them the platform. And fencing's cool, like we discussed with this mask on, mask off approach, like NFL or like F1, and then it also allows you to create personalities and stories. If off the piece they're the nicest person in the world and they do charity work and they help people and they do all these great things, and on the piece they're a total menace, that's interesting. That's a story that people want to watch. And you can create that with this mask on, mask off culture. In terms of commercializing the league, what I really like about fencing as well is it's a brand. As we sort of alluded to before, I don't need to tell you what it is. I don't need to create ideas of what it's associated with. You have that. I have that. I already think of certain of the right companies to connect with it. And so even though we're doing our first debut event in April, surprisingly, or at least to me, the amount of commitment we have from sponsors and media platforms and generally partners has been astonishing. We have some of the best brands out there, from the Mercedes to the Cash Apps to the Swarovskis to the goes on and on. And they all share that same kind of quality, which is this affiliation with luxury and elegance and precision and these kind of ideals. So it's been really interesting there. The other thing which I'm finding quite interesting about the media setup of this versus other new leagues is there seems to be an equal demand for going linear media plus streaming. And I had a feeling this might be a more this might ended up falling in the streaming side of the world, like we see with Baller League or like we see with some of the other disruptors. But as it happens, more traditional media outlets are also interested in this as an Olympic sport. So we're able to capture that hybrid need, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, Miles, take us home here. We're right at the 30-minute mark. I think we covered everything. Yeah, I thought that was a great way to sort of conclude on what you guys are doing in WFL. Tell us, what are you excited about? Give us a little bit more on the LA event in April coming up. You guys kick off. Take us home and let people know what they should be in for.
Yeah, so I'm beyond excited. It's been like less than a year that, myself and the team have really worked extremely hard. They've done so much work. I'm kind of trying to, start this idea into an actual physical league, which has been incredible. And I'm so excited because I think not only can we really take the sport from niche to mainstream, I think it's going to be so beautiful for the athletes to also get this love and, recognition that they deserve. And we're showing a brand new way the sport should be viewed, which I think is how you grow and push a sport. So I think that's what I'm so excited for. But also just the ambiance and just seeing a new sport with a new light and just a new energy. I think that's what I'm so excited about, is just really seeing all the athletes there, all the people that come in to watch us, and just see the sport in a brand new light. And I think that's what is going to be amazing for the sport, is capturing the audience.
I love that.
The Shrine LA, which is where they had the SAG after. So it's not just a little venue, guys. This is a real one.
Let's go. Leo, what's website? Where can people learn more? Buy tickets, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing. Tickets are selling out fast, so do check it out. They're being sold on AXS, but more broadly, you can find all the information out about World Fencing League at www.worldfencingleague.org. And we have an Instagram page and we have a LinkedIn page. And more generally, if you follow Chiron as well, we're always giving updates about what our team's working on.
Yeah.
So
and it's in my bio.
Love it. Yeah, we'll get all that. But appreciate you both hopping on. I'm excited to,
Thank you.
See the progress. We'll get you guys back on. I don't know, Leo, we might not be able to do 3 times in this short time period, but
there's too many.
Yeah, we'll pull one of your other team members.
Cool.
But excited to see how it goes post and follow the progress. So congrats on getting it ready and rolling. And I think we all gained a lot from this here today. And it's really cool to see, people in. It's just cool to see sports like fencing take a main stage and folks like you, Miles, not just stay in your lane and do your Olympics and your own little brand thing, but say, hey, how can I give back to the sport that gave me everything? So, props to you on that as well.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, dude. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew.